get the people out. You know, you have to look at the people. Many of them are murderers. Many of them are people.
How does a government office become the heart of a cartel empire? That question shattered the calm morning in Austin when black SUVs surrounded the marble steps of the Texas State Executive Office. Inside, beneath the polished seal of the Lone Star State silence broke to the rhythm of heavy boots and the echo of shouted commands. The FBI and DEA weren't there for documents, they were there for war. Behind locked doors and mahogany desks lay the unthinkable crates of fentanyl military-grade rifles and ledgers linking the state's own procurement system to one of Mexico's most violent cartels. Federal agents moved with precision. The target, Ethan Mallory, a high-ranking state official once praised for his unshakable integrity, stood frozen as armored teams breached his office. The files they uncovered told a story far darker than bribery or blackmail. They revealed an organized betrayal of the public trust, one that stretched from Austin to the border and deep into Mexico's underworld. According to Justice Department briefings obtained by Reuters and The Guardian, investigators had tracked an unusual pattern of state-authorized shipments. What appeared to be infrastructure, cargo, construction equipment, chemical containers, replacement parts, massed metric tons of narcotics. These weren't random diversions. They were orchestrated movements signed and approved through legitimate channels. When President Trump addressed the media later that day, his tone was unyielding. "The rot doesn't stop at the border," he declared. "We're cutting it out from the inside." His words reflected the gravity of the operation and the deep unease among Americans who believed government institutions were untouchable. Behind the seizure of 2.8 tons of fentanyl, enough to kill millions, stood months of encrypted surveillance, financial tracing, and cooperation between federal task forces and ICE units embedded in Texas logistics hubs. Agents described the operation as peeling back a facade of democracy to reveal the skeleton of a cartel. The story struck a national nerve. It wasn't about drugs anymore. It was about trust. How could a public office, a symbol of accountability, become the headquarters for an international narcotics network? And if corruption could hide behind the flag and the state seal, what other pillars of authority were already compromised? Her name surfaced like a ghost in a data stream: Marta Alicia Mendez Aguilar. Federal analysts knew the alias La Diabla, a name whispered in border towns and cartel briefings for years. To the FBI, she was a phantom. To Mexico's intelligence services, she was presumed dead. But in reality, she was alive, thriving in Texas under a new identity, one built not with forged passports, but with legitimate documents issued by the very system she corrupted. BBC correspondents confirmed through state registry data that Marta Aguilar, a well-known philanthropist and logistics entrepreneur, had been photographed at public events, shaking hands with mayors and attending charity dinners. She had contracts with the Department of Transportation and even sponsored local police fundraisers. She wasn't hiding underground, she was hiding in plain sight. Through encrypted communication recovered during the Mallory raid, investigators pieced together how her influence stretched from city councils to state procurement offices. Mallory had granted her front companies priority routing codes, which effectively turned her trucking fleets into untouchable arteries within Texas's logistics chain. Every shipment she moved past federal checkpoints without inspection, flagged as critical infrastructure cargo. DW reported that this mechanism was not just corruption, it was innovation. La Diabla transformed the traditional cartel into a hybrid bureaucracy, one analyst said. She replaced guns with government contracts and used transparency laws as camouflage. The irony was brutal. In a country struggling to contain an opioid epidemic, the fentanyl crisis had now breached its own institutions. Her system funneled synthetic opioids north while sending assault rifle scopes and tactical parts south under legal cover. Defense News compared the operation's scale to a military-grade supply chain engineered for efficiency, redundancy, and survival. Public reaction turned visceral. Social media flooded with disbelief. Images of Aguilar smiling beside lawmakers went viral, captioned simply, "The Queen of Hell wore a crown of legitimacy." In Austin, protesters gathered outside the Capitol demanding resignations and arrests. Yet amid the outrage, the question grew darker: how many others like her had already learned the formula how to weaponize legitimacy itself? In Washington, President Trump ordered an interagency review of all state-level procurement networks. "We will dismantle the system that let this happen," he vowed. America's enemies don't always carry rifles. Sometimes they carry briefcases. That night, as agents combed through Aguilar's mansion in suburban San Antonio, they found something more chilling than money or weapons. A wall of photographs documenting decades of power, governors, congressmen, foreign diplomats. Every image told the same story: proximity, power, permission. And so the mystery deepened. Who was La Diabla really, a cartel architect, or a symptom of a larger decay within the machinery of state? If she could buy silence so easily, what else had been sold in the shadows? By dawn, a name flashed across the digital command board inside the San Antonio DEA field office, Operation Iron Veil. It was the culmination of 8 months of undercover work, forensic tracing, and joint coordination across 6 federal agencies. The mission: sever the invisible arteries feeding La Diabla's empire before she could vanish again. The Reuters morning brief called it a war without a front line. Agents weren't chasing convoys through deserts or tunnels under the Rio Grande. They were dismantling a logistics system wired directly into the state's bureaucratic core: trucking permits, trade invoices, customs codes, all stamped with official seals. The blueprint was chilling in its simplicity. Northbound industrial cargo carried powder and pills disguised as chemical supplies. Southbound recycled mechanical components hid rifles, optics, and tactical systems bound for cartel strongholds. Every movement was automated through legitimate state databases. Mallory's office had been the switchboard. Forensic auditors from The Guardian later revealed that over 1,200 shipments had moved through this digital corridor in just 18 months, carrying nearly $1.8 billion worth of narcotics and weapons. The paperwork was flawless signatures, authentic oversight minimal. In one memo recovered from Mallory's laptop, a single line captured the ethos of the operation: "The perfect crime is legal until it's exposed." But exposure came swiftly, as Trump's administration issued an executive order expanding interagency strike authority. The FBI and ICE deployed integrated teams across the southern corridor. No press leaks, no advance warrants in public databases. Silence became their armor. At 5:52 a.m., the first convoy rolled out from Fort Sam, Houston. Unmarked SUVs, low-flying helicopters, and armored units marked only by discrete agency insignia. The objective wasn't just to intercept drugs, it was to seize control of an entire infrastructure, a state-level supply network that had fused public service with criminal enterprise. Al Jazeera reported that analysts from NATO's Transnational Crime Division were briefed on the case, calling it a blueprint for institutional infiltration. Western security experts warned that if a cartel could mimic state efficiency, adversarial nations might adapt similar tactics, weaponizing trade and bureaucracy against democracy itself. The balance between national security and civil freedom began to tighten. Critics warned of overreach, questioning how far federal power should go in rooting out internal corruption. Supporters countered that survival demanded vigilance. What few outside the operation understood was that Iron Veil wasn't just a crackdown, it was a rescue mission. Every false shipment intercepted, every document seized, was another thread cut from a web that had quietly bound state governance to organized crime. The operation's early successes restored a flicker of faith, but deeper questions remained. If the cartel could merge with government systems, once could it happen again? And if the line between governance and corruption can be rewritten digitally, where does transparency end and infiltration begin? The morning sky over El Paso was pale and silent until it wasn't. At 6:11 a.m., the stillness broke with the thunder of rotor blades and the detonation of a single breach charge. The target, a warehouse disguised as an agricultural supply depot identified by Defense News as one of La Diabla's primary hubs for fentanyl storage and transshipment. When the door folded inward, agents moved in formation, 3 fronts, 12 men night vision cutting through the dust. Within seconds, the crack of gunfire ricocheted off the concrete walls. Cartel enforcers fought with grim precision, their rifles modified for burst fire. The engagement lasted 2 minutes and 47 seconds, an eternity in close quarters. When silence returned, the air was thick with cordite and plaster dust. 7 cartel gunmen lay neutralized. 1 agent was hit, stabilized, and extracted. Behind the smoke, agents discovered the real weapon, a fleet of 18-wheeler trucks with lead-lined interior panels custom-engineered to defeat border X-ray scanners. Every truck carried dual manifests, one legitimate, one coded. Hidden within were thousands of pounds of fentanyl precursors, their destinations disguised as industrial parks across Texas and Louisiana. A second strike hit Laredo 90 minutes later. No gunfire this time, only quiet compliance. Workers froze as the DEA moved through the Riverstone Freight compound, seizing records burner phones and encrypted tablets. What they uncovered was staggering: a digital ledger linking shipments to more than 30 US states. Every route began in Texas. Every receiver passed standard inspection. BBC News reported that over 800 individuals were detained in the first 72 hours, freight brokers, municipal officers, even a county coroner. One federal prosecutor described it bluntly: it wasn't a cartel infiltrating government. It was government functioning as a cartel. Across Texas, fear turned into disbelief. How many public servants had looked the other way, or worse, played their part? The raids revealed more than a criminal network. They exposed a moral failure. This was the collapse of vigilance. By nightfall, President Trump appeared on national television, his message uncompromising. America doesn't negotiate with corruption, he said. If we don't fight this war at home, we will lose it abroad. His words rippled through the nation as footage from the raids dominated every major outlet. Armed agents seized trucks and pallets of fentanyl piled like sandbags in a war zone. Analysts on DW compared Operation Iron Veil to Cold War counterintelligence programs, arguing that America's internal security doctrine was shifting once again away from foreign threats and toward domestic subversion. It's not about borders anymore, one expert said. It's about the integrity of institutions. Families near the raid zones described sleepless nights. Children woke to the sound of helicopters. Mothers cried watching the news, realizing the same roads they drove daily had been used to traffic death. The raids ended, but the fear didn't. For many Texans, it was no longer a question of how this could happen, but whether it was already happening again somewhere else behind another door. Days after the raids, investigators faced a haunting realization: La Diabla's empire had not relied on chaos, but on order. Every document, every shipment, every employee appeared legitimate. The system wasn't broken, it was working exactly as she had designed it. Federal auditors from Reuters and DW reviewed seized records and found a stunning pattern. Each front company, transportation, construction, chemical, supply, held valid business licenses. Tax filings were immaculate. Even workplace safety inspections passed flawlessly. She turned bureaucracy into camouflage, one Department of Justice official admitted. Inside a confiscated storage unit north of San Antonio, agents found a wall of neatly stacked file boxes. Every shipment cataloged, every bribe logged, not as a payoff, but as a service fee. The Guardian later described it as a corporate ecosystem built for crime. Aguilar didn't run a cartel, she ran a multinational enterprise masked by government efficiency. What horrified investigators most was the scope of complicity. County administrators had signed procurement waivers. Transportation officials had approved expedited permits. A sheriff's deputy even acted as a regional security consultant. The system didn't merely hide her empire, it sustained it. According to Al Jazeera, more than $14 million in state funds were laundered through public-private partnerships, giving Aguilar's companies the appearance of community service. She sponsored public housing renovations, veteran programs, and local fairs. Her charity work bought silence and legitimacy in equal measure. As public outrage mounted, experts began comparing the scandal to historic corruption cases that reshaped nations. Some drew parallels to Italy's Tangentopoli or Mexico's Ayotzinapa investigation, moments when trust in the state collapsed overnight. But this was different. This was not a failure of oversight, it was a fusion of power and profit. Strategically, the implications were severe. Jane's Defense Weekly warned that criminal infiltration of state logistics posed a systemic vulnerability to national defense readiness. If narcotics could move unnoticed, what stopped foreign adversaries from exploiting similar channels for espionage or sabotage? The fallout spread beyond Texas. State governments across the country launched emergency audits. Homeland Security issued advisories for all federal contractors. The White House announced Operation Clean Ledger, an initiative to vet all interdepartmental cargo systems. Yet even as reforms began, the damage to public faith lingered. Churches in Austin held vigils for the fallen agent. Schools added fentanyl awareness programs. Communities that once trusted their leaders now questioned every handshake, every ribbon cutting, every smiling photo op. And still, La Diabla herself remained at large. Sightings flooded social media reports of her fleeing to Monterrey, of surgical reconstruction of alliances with rival cartels, but none confirmed. She had vanished the way she lived, efficiently, invisibly, and with a smile. The deeper truth, as BBC summarized, was chilling. She proved that corruption no longer hides in darkness, it hides in daylight behind professionalism, paperwork, and procedure. So the story evolved from scandal to reckoning, not just a cartel takedown, but a national mirror held up to America's institutions. Because what failed wasn't only law enforcement, it was the assumption that the system itself was immune. If legitimacy can be weaponized, then what truly separates the lawful from the criminal? And how long before another smiling official learns the same lesson, how to build an empire not in secrecy, but in plain sight? The headlines faded, but the shock did not. Across Texas, citizens gathered in courthouses, schools, and churches trying to comprehend what had happened. The collapse wasn't just institutional, it was emotional. America's sense of invulnerability had cracked, revealing a truth that no wall or law could fully defend against corruption born from within. President Trump addressed the nation again from the White House, calling the scandal an act of treason against the American people. Standing before a wall of flags, he announced a sweeping national initiative to secure state-level logistics and audit every procurement channel linked to federal contracts. This will never happen again, he vowed, not on our watch. But for many Americans, the damage ran deeper than policy. Reuters described the mood in Austin as a state in mourning, not for lives lost, but for trust betrayed. Across news outlets, BBC, DW, The Guardian, the coverage shifted from law enforcement to philosophy. What does democracy become when its symbols, badges, seals, signatures can be weaponized? Federal investigators continued to pursue leads on La Diabla's whereabouts. Al Jazeera reported that encrypted transmissions traced to Guatemala suggested her network was regrouping under new identities, potentially merging with remnants of the Sinaloa structure. But beyond the hunt for one fugitive, the question facing America grew larger. Security analysts warned that the next great threat to the United States might not come from a foreign power, but from the erosion of institutional integrity. Jane's Defense Weekly wrote, "When criminals understand bureaucracy better than bureaucrats, the battlefield shifts from the border to the boardroom." For ordinary citizens, the impact was more personal. Teachers spoke of students who'd lost parents to fentanyl overdoses, families destroyed by drugs trafficked through the very state meant to protect them, veterans betrayed by government contracts that funneled money to crime questioned the meaning of service. It's like finding out your house was on fire, and the firemen were selling the matches, one retired officer told The Guardian. Yet amid the grief, something began to stir an awakening. Communities started demanding transparency in local governance. Whistleblower hotlines filled. Civil oversight groups formed to monitor state spending. For the first time in years, citizens began looking inward, not outward, for accountability. Strategically, America stood at a crossroads. Would it rebuild trust through vigilance and reform, or retreat into cynicism and fear? The balance between freedom and security, already strained by years of domestic unrest and global conflict, was once again under review. Trump's administration framed the crisis as a national rebirth. This isn't the end, he said, it's the reminder that freedom must be defended from within. The question that lingers now is not about one cartel queen or one fallen official. It's about the resilience of democracy itself. How many layers of oversight, how many promises must fail before vigilance becomes a civic duty, not just a law enforcement one? Because power, as this scandal proved, doesn't only corrupt, it adapts, it learns, it hides in new forms. And if the American people stop watching, it will rise again quietly, politely, wearing a smile that looks just like trust. The FBI and DEA's unprecedented raids in Texas revealed a stunning betrayal. A cartel network led by Marta Alicia Mendez Aguilar, known as La Diabla, had infiltrated state logistics through corruption contracts and legitimacy itself. Under the authority of Ethan Mallory, a senior state official, the cartel disguised narcotics and weapons shipments as government cargo, creating a two-way smuggling route across the United States. Operation Iron Veil exposed this hidden empire military-grade trucks, encrypted networks, and institutional complicity reaching from warehouses to city halls. The revelations shocked the nation, forcing President Trump to launch sweeping reforms and reshaping America's perception of internal security. But beyond the arrests and reforms lay a deeper truth. Power no longer hides in darkness, but in the bureaucracy of everyday governance. The scandal became a warning to democracies worldwide that vigilance must begin at home, because when the tools of government can be repurposed for crime, the greatest threat isn't invasion from abroad, it's betrayal from within.